Uhuru Sasa, which means freedom now in Kiswahili, and we just completed our tribute to a young man by the name of Roy Ayers, a young man who grew up in Los Angeles, born and reared in Los Angeles, California, and was very close to Fela Kuti, and Fela Kuti told him that he was a Yoruba man, and we just lost Assata Shakur, Assata Obawale. Let me correct that. Assata Shakur. I'll get the Yoruba pronunciation of her middle name before the end of the show. But we're joined on the line by Dr. Gerald Horne, and I'll turn it over to the good doctor. How are you doing today, sir?
Oh, I'm fine. With regard to Comrade Assata, let me say that there have been a number of tributes to her, but for a special and notable tribute to her and her legacy, tune in to Freedom Now on Saturday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern on kpfk.org. I dare say that there will be the mother of all Assata tributes on Freedom Now. Secondly, breaking news. Eric Adams, the scandal-ridden mayor of New York City, a man of African ancestry, by the way, who I'm afraid to say was at one time at least, and perhaps even now, quite close to some of our comrades from Southeast Queens. In any event, he's dropping out of the race. He is the incumbent. He, of course, is being challenged by the up-and-coming Social Democrat Z. Kwame Mamdani, who has a double-digit lead, but now the ruling class in New York, forcing Eric Adams to drop out of the race, feels that they can defeat Mr. Mamdani by focusing on the bid of the disgraced sex pest former Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York State. Finally, or next to finally, let me compliment two of our premier Black intellectuals, both at Howard University, by the way. Nicole Hannah-Jones, she of the 1619 Project, and Ta-Nehisi Coates, better known to many in this audience as the son of Paul Coates of Black Classic Press, longtime stalwart at Howard University and at the Baltimore, Washington area. Both Nicole and Ta-Nehisi have really outdid themselves in their attack on Charlie Kirk, who we've been talking about quite a bit, really unmasking Charlie Kirk. And what's notable is that they have used their influence in the mass media. Ta-Nehisi writing for Vanity Fair, a major magazine, denouncing Charlie Kirk, and Nicole on the New York Times website. Of course, in addition to being a professor at Howard University, she continues to have a role in the New York Times. And so the fact that they're pushing back against this neo-fascist upsurge to create a martyr in Charlie Kirk is quite notable, and I think that they both deserve a pat on the back. And finally, in the September 25th, 2025 edition of the Wall Street Journal, there is an interesting interview with the chief executive of DP World, which runs ports all over the world, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, United States. It's controlled from Dubai. And here are the takeaways, at least for our audience. He's asked, quote, how are U.S. tariffs affecting global trade flows? His answer is, we are seeing a big increase in trade to Africa. Whatever cannot be absorbed or has difficulty going to the United States is going to the other parts of the world, particularly Africa. Then he is asked, Are there concerns about DP World's investments in India, given the recent U.S. tariffs that are slowing trade between the two countries? His response, speaking of DP World's chief executive, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, he says, and I quote, "India still has a huge market that it can serve better than anyone else, and that's Africa. Prime Minister Modi went to many African countries to establish relations, and you can see a lot of cargo from India that goes to that area. In my opinion, India is better placed than China because from the Indian Ocean to Africa, it's so easy for them. Of course, no doubt he's referring to Mombasa and Dar es Salaam and Durban, all of whom have substantial populations of South Asian descent, and of course, are also cited in key African countries, including Kenya, Tanzania, and South Africa."
Yeah, well, let me say that Eric Adams reminds me of Mabutu Sese Sekou Kuku Nyabindu Wazabanga. He's Exhibit A on blackness being necessary but not sufficient. And I heard Eric Adams speak. You know, it's on YouTube, and you listen to him, and you would think he would sound almost like Omali Ishitella in terms of he can really play the game. Wouldn't you say that's true?
Well, yes, he's very articulate, as they like to say about Negroes. But also, he may wind up as the U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia. And
my goodness.
What's interesting there is that part of what got him in the hot water was being on the take from the Turks. And as we know, Saudi Arabia used to be under the jurisdiction of the Ottoman Empire, that is to say, under the jurisdiction of the Turks. One more point in that regard, just this past week in New York City, there was this meeting between Mr. Trump, the US president, and a number of leaders of Islamic and Arab nations, including Saudi Arabia. I bring this up only to say that the geography of the table setting was quite striking. At the head of the table were President Trump and President Erdogan. And sitting around the table were the leaders of all these Arab and Islamic countries. It's almost as if it was a de facto recreation of the Ottoman Empire, this time with joint jurisdiction with the United States of America.
You're listening to Diasporic Music. We're on the line with Dr. Gerald Horne, and but there's a history of African Americans, hooking up with the big money people in the Islamic world. All we have to do is look at Donald Warden, who was influenced everyone from Huey Newton to Ron Karenga, Khalid Abdul Tariq El Mansour. I guess you probably knew him personally, didn't you?
Well, yes, and let me add another point. As we speak, in Saudi Arabia is the black comic Dave Chappelle, who, as I understand, happens to be Muslim, by the way.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Because the Saudis are paying big money, big cheddar, for Mr. Chappelle and other comics to come tell jokes. It'll be interesting to see if he engages in self-censorship, however, because the Saudis are very sensitive about their, quote, culture, unquote. And in any case, Eric Adams, as ambassador to Saudi Arabia, since he seems to be taken with greenbacks, that offers many opportunities for graft and corruption, which I'm sure he'll take advantage of.
And I think that Dave Chappelle is slick enough to tone his things down because his mother was recruited by Patrice Emery Lumumba, as you know, to go to the Congo. I don't know if she ever went, but she met Lumumba, I guess, when he came to New York and impressed Patrice Emery Lumumba. Is there very, very much written on that?
Well, I've only seen him mention that in interviews, and now to connect the dots, recall that our premier Pan-African filmmaker, Raoul Peck, he of the documentary Exterminate All the Brutes, the docudrama Lumumba, the docudrama The Young Karl Marx, he, of course, is of Haitian ancestry, but he, too, spent time as a lad in the Congo. I'm not sure if it was during the time, however, of Patrice Lumumba.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Raoul Peck is very close to our comrade Cameron Bailey at International Film Festival. But Melinda, let's start off with the. Oh, sorry, Dr. Horne. Had you completed your thought?
Full speed ahead.
All right, Melinda, you can kick it off.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we wanted to talk about, we're kind of behind the Canada and Mexico summit.
Well, that was intriguing, was it not? The fact that both Canada and Mexico are under pressure from U.S. imperialism. Supposedly, they're part of Menage a Trois, the USMCA, United States, Mexico, Canada agreement, formerly NAFTA. But Mr. Trump has threatened to bomb Mexico and threatened to annex Canada. So wouldn't you know it, that showing up in Mexico City just a few days ago was Prime Minister Carney of Canada. I thought that was a very wise move on his part. And as I've mentioned in other programs, I think that something we should not lose sight of, but may be flying under the radar, is that U.S. imperialism can be said fairly to be at war with a good deal of the Spanish-speaking world. Not only Mexico, not only Cuba and the embargo, the blockade, for example, not only Venezuela, which we may have time to talk about, that is to say these misbegotten plans to invade Caracas. I saw an article today talking about how easy and simple it would be to assassinate President Maduro. This is the kind of wild talk you have in the United States of America. The fact that President Petro of Colombia, his visa to the United States has just been revoked because they don't like what he has to say about historic Palestine. And then to go to the so-called mother country, one of the EU countries that is most stalwart in opposition to U.S. imperialism right now happens to be Spain, believe it or not. Prime Minister Sanchez has stood tall against this idea of spending 3% of gross domestic product for military materiel, that is to say, sending a check across the Atlantic to the U.S. military industrial complex. And we should not gloss over that reality, particularly since we already know that the three richest and most populous states in the United States of America all used to be under the jurisdiction of His Catholic Majesty in España. Speaking of California, Texas, Texas, and Florida. And of course, Florida sent settlers to North America, Spain sent settlers to Florida in 1565, decades before the English, for example. And so if you want to be optimistic, you can say that the U.S. imperialism is backtracking, it's making a move back to the past because it can no longer confront the present day reality of the rise of China. That may be premature, but not premature is this ongoing war with the Spanish-speaking world.
You are listening to Diasporic Music on Black Power 96. I wanted to go to the UN General Assembly. Israel looked like they were really under got what they deserved in terms of fire. A lot of fire came after them. But I think that Africa, in my estimation, Africa showed up and showed out. And could you talk about, the president of Botswana? How do you see him in terms of politics in the 21st century?
Well, Botswana is trying to take greater control of its diamond industry, which, of course, historically has been in the tight grip of De Beers and other vultures from neighboring South Africa. But I was struck by the remarks of the leaders of Niger and the Sahel states, all of whom singled out for condemnation France. As a matter of fact, they say that in terms of the religious zealots that are bombarding each of those states, speaking of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, they say that France is in bed with these religious zealots. It's a kind of revenge against the fact that the Sahel states demanded that French troops leave, and France is trying to worm its way back into the Sahel by indicating and suggesting that there's still a role for its military, and they're doing that in a devious fashion by sponsoring these zealots. Of course, we've been stressing the point that we suspect that the Gulf monarchs, particularly the United Arab Emirates, are in the forefront of that kind of deviltry. We already know, it's been reported extensively, that the UAE is involved up to its eyeballs in the conflict in Sudan, which in many ways is the most profound and serious human rights disaster on planet Earth today, even exceeding, believe it or not, Gaza. Speaking of the latter, I was struck by the fact that when Mr. Netanyahu got up to speak at the United Nations, that a number of delegations stormed out of the hall. He spoke mostly to an empty room, quite appropriate, signifying the diplomatic isolation of the Zionist entity. Tomorrow, he'll be in Washington. Once again, I think this is his fourth or fifth trip this year to Washington, conferring with Mr. Trump. Now, Mr. Trump, of course, on paper at least, he has a dilemma, because recall what I just said about this meeting in New York with Arab and Muslim nations, with sitting side by side President Erdogan of Turkey. Of course, President Erdogan showed up at the Oval Office just a day or two ago. And given the fact that Turkey has a population of 82 million, it was not that much of a stretch for Turkey to write a check to buy a number of jumbo jets from Boeing. And as you know, with Mr. Trump and under capitalism generally, money talks. And we already know that Qatar, recently bombed by Israel, gifted Mr. Trump a jumbo jet all of its own, all of his own, worth about $200 million. I've even seen estimates of $400 million. A flying palace. Now, to be sure, Israel has some well-heeled supporters in the Zionist community of the United States of America. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because Mr. Trump has already said that he's against annexation. But as you know, he's very mercurial, and he's willing to change his mind depending on either who spoke to him last or who wrote the last check, for example. And speaking of which, New York Times had a very devastating piece just a few days ago about how Mr. Trump was able to wangle a multi-billion-dollar investment in his cryptocurrency from the UAE, from the United Arab Emirates. And in return, Mr. Trump allowed NVIDIA, by some measures, the most profitable enterprise on planet Earth right now. It, of course, manufactures the chips that are so necessary for computers and artificial intelligence, despite the fact that some of Mr. Trump's advisors suggested that the UAE might leak these sophisticated chips to China, and the United States is trying to keep these chips out of the hands of the Chinese, Mr. Trump went along with the quid pro quo. And what's interesting about the quid pro quo is that many of us have suggested that Mr. Trump is undermining U.S. imperialism. Well, here is a direct way he's doing so, because there are many in the crypto world who see crypto as a way to undermine the paramountcy of the U.S. dollar and ultimately the entire U.S. banking system, believe it or not. So once again, the stories coming out of Washington are almost too strange to be true. But certainly, I think that what is true is that Mr. Netanyahu is under enormous pressure, given the recognition of Palestine by a number of European countries. Now, of course, a lot of the commentary sees the recognition as performative, and I don't necessarily disagree. However, as I pointed out to a number of audiences, in 1964, France recognized the People's Republic of China, and the United States did not recognize China until 14 to 15 years later. I suspect that a similar dynamic might be at play for reasons already adduced concerning the investments and the corruption from Arab and Islamic countries, leading to pressure on U.S. imperialism to move towards recognition of Palestine. Mr. Trump has already said, as noted, that he's against further annexation. So the plot thickens. And as we've said before on this program, you have to watch where the puck is going, not necessarily where it sits.
You're listening to Diasporic Music. We're talking, or we're speaking with Dr. Gerald Horne. Melinda, what's next on the table?
I don't know if we want to go back and talk, because we have stuff on the table. Did you want to talk about the African resistance, the slave trade? Who is Leo Terrell?
Oh, Leo Terrell. Leo Terrell is one of your homeboys, Norman. He's a Black lawyer from Los Angeles. Some of you might recall him from cable television, touting the supposed virtues of O.J. Simpson back in the day. But he's more into a Trumpista. He's part of the so-called Justice Department. He's leading the charge in the struggle against, quote, anti-Semitism, unquote. The man who socked Columbia University, not only with $200 million in fines, not only reparations paid to Jewish American employees of Columbia University, supposedly because of the suffering they endured at these camps of students on campus in Upper Manhattan. That was all Leo Terrell. I mean, he's a wild man. I mean, it's incredible what he's accomplishing nowadays. And with regard to the former point, once again, a point of personal privilege. Yesterday on Freedom Now, KPFK Los Angeles, we interviewed M. Ousmane Traore, whose roots are in Senegambia. He's written this new book on resisting the slave trade in West Africa. This is a new historiographical trend, and it's very potent ammunition, because what he brings forward is how Africans were organizing assassination squads, targeting the enslavers. But of course, ultimately, many of them were overrun. He also points out that the part of Africa he studies not only sent enslaved across the Atlantic to Louisiana, Martinique, and Guadeloupe. Of course, this was the French trade, but also north to Morocco, where they constituted the fabled Black Army of Morocco, remnants of which you can still find in Morocco. And of course, I'll be dealing with that subject in part in a book I'll publish next year, dealing with North Africa and East Africa. But in any case, check out that interview with Professor Traore. He too is in the Southland, Pomona College in Claremont, California, in LA County. But the interview is interesting. The book is interesting.
Yeah, I remember my mother used to always laugh about Shreveport, Louisiana, and O.J. Simpson. They would be talking about O.J. Simpson came off of a farm in Shreveport, Louisiana. She would always laugh and say, you know, Shreveport is it's not a Shreveport is a city. You know, it's a developed city. You know, in terms of it's not like New Orleans, but it's not a. I don't think they had farms in Shreveport. Although, you know, black people, you know, you might have some black people that had chickens and maybe even hogs in their backyards. But Shreveport was was and is a thriving city. I think what's the name? What was 50 Cent has got a film studio down there, doesn't he?
Oh, really? Well, I know he spends a lot of time in Houston for whatever reason. I'm not sure.
No, he's got his company is based in Shreveport right now, right?
Oh, I see. Well, I was going to say he spends time here, maybe because Megan Thee Stallion spends time here. Who knows?
How much time do we have? Well, we have about 7 minutes left. Yeah, Melinda, you have some more questions for Brother Horne?
I don't know. Do we want to go into the baseball playoffs?
Yeah, I'm expecting the LA Dodgers to do quite well in the baseball playoffs. Of course, they have the spectacular Shohei Ohtani, one of the best pitchers, one of the best sluggers, not to mention Mookie Betts, not to mention a astute manager of African and Japanese ancestry, speaking of Dave Roberts. So if you back me into a corner, I would say the LA Dodgers, but of course there are other teams we can not ignore, including the Milwaukee Brewers, believe it or not. But the smart money, I think, is on the Dodgers.
How your hometown team, St. Louis? I haven't followed them. How are they doing in baseball in 2025?
Not that well. It's been a down year for the Redbirds, I'm afraid to say. But wait till next year, as they say. And by the way, I just came from Atlanta, Georgia, from a Black History conference, which was very useful, very important. I had some interesting encounters there, though. I must say, I'm unaccustomed to folks being rude and discourteous to me, at least at a conference like this. And that happened. And interestingly enough, it was at the hands of a scholar who I think used to pass, quite frankly, but decided that the better part of wisdom crossing the color line into the Negro community. It was a very weird experience. I might even write something about it.
I understand you met Vern Smith down there.
Yeah, it was like old home week. That's what's good about these conferences. Atlanta, I don't know. It's sort of down at the heels, if you ask me. I think downtown Atlanta is, despite the skyscrapers, et cetera, is a bit run down. And certainly what is really alarming from my point of view is the number of Black unhoused in the streets of downtown Atlanta. These racial hierarchies too in Atlanta are quite something. I need not tell you who's sitting at the top of the pyramid and who is scrambling beneath to try to keep afloat.
Yeah, well, Vern is one of the San Francisco people that was fought at the San Francisco, the strike in San Francisco. Vern is also an author, and he is like yourself and myself. He has Mississippi roots, and he's very close to another young man from Mississippi, lead singer G.C. Cameron, used to be with the Spinners and the Temptations. He's very close to Brother Cameron.
Well, I'm happy to say I got a lot of leads from the Mississippi Slavery Project. In fact, I'll be interviewing the author L. Dorsey, who has a book coming out on the Vicksburg Massacre of 1874, a real turning point in the history of white supremacy, a real turning point in terms of the Black liberation struggle. So once again, here's my third unpaid commercial for kpfk.org. Tune in sooner rather than later for the interview with L. Dorsey concerning his book, The Vicksburg Massacre of 1874.
You mentioned Vicksburg, Mississippi. That's the birthplace of Charles Burnett, an old schoolmate of mine, a great filmmaker, he doesn't like people to mention it, one of the greatest hurdlers in the history of Los Angeles track and field. I think the Jones brothers, Elvin Jones, a great drummer with Coltrane, he was born in Pontiac, Michigan, but all his other brothers were born in Vicksburg. And I think the great Willie Dixon, Willie Dixon was. What are your thoughts on Willie Dixon, the bass player, singer, songwriter, and music man? What are your thoughts on Willie Dixon?
Oh, right on with Willie Dixon. But I was about to say that one of the things I found in terms of doing this research on Mississippi slavery is that for various reasons, a lot of the work and a lot of the sources deal with Natchez, Mississippi. Because it's a port. Now, Vicksburg is a port too, but admittedly, Natchez is closer to the Gulf of Mexico, or as Mr. Trump would have it, the Gulf of America, and closer to New Orleans as well. But I think it gives you a sort of skewed point of view, and my roots are across the state. In Starkville, where Mississippi State University is located, for example, and in West Point, all of which are strung along or not that far from the Alabama border. And Alabama.
And with that, sir, I think we have run out of time. It's 4:00 on the button, and we'll see you next week, sir.
Good luck. Bye-bye.
And I would like to thank Lisa Watson for keeping us on track. Everything sounding nice and, as they used to say in Jamaica, nice and crisp. And Melinda Francis, your parting thoughts?
Yeah, I hope that all our listeners stay safe going through the week. And we'll see everybody in the whirlwind next week.
We state these facts only to let you know that those of us who are revolutionary, Pan-Africanists, is not because we love revolution. It is historically determined, and we have no alternative but to follow history and to use history for the benefit of our people.
Power to the people.